So The Marvels is about to come out. Who knows, depending on how long this takes me to edit, it might be out for you already. And as you'd expect, there's a lot of discussion happening around the film's lead character, Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, why people do or don't like her, all that. This is typical for one of these movies, but less typically, that discussion never really stopped. Carol seems to possess a sort of evergreen relevance the other Marvel leads, even the A-listers, don't really enjoy in their off-seasons. Specifically, the discussion of what's wrong with Captain Marvel and why people don't like her is one which seems to never end, and to take up far more collective effort than equivalent discussions on characters in other projects, even those fan consensus holds to be weaker. A comprehensive analysis, defense, or critique of Carol's role in the MCU would no doubt take me months to make and take you hours to watch. This video's scope is far smaller, but I have been wanting to make it for probably a year now, because in the sea of Danvers discussion, one curious idea keeps cropping up. The idea that the MCU should have looked to the legacy animated show Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes for help with Carol's characterization. It's an idea I've seen on Marvel Twitter, in Reddit threads, in YouTube comments. I'm just showing you the latter because I can get the visuals most easily, with nary a reply pushing back. There seems to be a consensus here then, that Carol was done well in EMH and not so much in live action. So who is the Carol Danvers of Earth's Mightiest Heroes? Who is the Carol of the MCU? Is the gulf between the two really so great? And what can this comparison tell us about the often extreme responses MCU viewers have had to live-action Carol? In Earth's Mightiest Heroes, Carol Danvers is Ms. Marvel. She can come across all business, stoic.
Withdraw from Earth, now!
Carol?
Do I know you?
But beneath that outer layer, she is cocky yet friendly.
That means she outranks you, old man.
And as a Sword Field Commander, I outrank you back when you did Ops for S.H.I.E.L.D.
That being said, in dangerous situations, she's certainly a blast first, ask questions later kind of girl.
No sudden moves.
What, are you on its side or something? It's an evil robot.
Yeah, I'm gonna shoot it now if that's okay with you too.
No!
And those dangerous situations themselves, well, she's rather fond of them.
Okay, let's do this, ugly.
Carol's not boring, she'll have a bit of fun, but when it's time to be serious, there's no nonsense.
My name is Ms. Marvel, and I'm here to welcome you to Earth. Now go home.
If someone says she can't do something, that's exactly the thing she's gonna do next.
You cannot beat Ronan.
You don't know me at all.
You seek to face me again. It will end no better for you. Fall! Why won't you fall?
But it's not all about ego. Yes, she's defined by her own power, her own feats, but to a greater degree than most, she's also defined by group identities, the factions she joins, the Air Force, S.W.O.R.D., the Avengers, and her strong sense of affiliation to them.
So I joined the Air Force out of high school. They paid for college, but I re-enlisted anyway so I could fly jets. They pulled me into special investigations not long after. They knew I was a big believer in law and order. Without rules, we got nothing.
Order and rules are important to her, and one of the biggest struggles she faces is knowing when those rules need to be questioned and defied.
Clint, I need you to come with me. If Nick Fury thinks you're one of these Skrulls, I need to bring you in for interrogation. Those are the rules. I may be an Avenger now, but I'm also an agent of S.W.O.R.D. This is what we do.
Miss Marvel, on approach you said you had a report to file?
No. Nothing to report yet.
So that's the beloved take on Carol Danvers we see in EMH in a nutshell. What about her big screen counterpart? Well, in the MCU, Carol Danvers is Captain Marvel. She can come across all business, stoic.
You living so soon? We're just getting to know each other.
But beneath that outer layer, she's cocky,
Arm wrestle for the Tesseract?
yet friendly.
Hey, Peter Parker. You got something for me?
That being said, in dangerous situations, she's certainly a blast first, ask questions later kind of girl. And those dangerous situations themselves, she's rather fond of them. Carol's not boring, she'll have a bit of fun.
Don't make me do this.
Okay.
But when it's time to be serious, there's no nonsense.
If you hurt them,
I will burn you to the ground.
If someone says she can't do something, that's exactly the thing she's gonna do next.
Turn off the light show and prove to me you can beat me without.
But it's not all about ego. Yes, she's defined by her own power, her own feats, but to a greater degree than most, she's also defined by group identities. The factions she joins, the Air Force, Star Force, the Avengers, and her strong sense of affiliation to them.
Veers, Kree Star Force. We don't carry our identification on little cards. Heroes. Noble warrior heroes.
Orders and rules are important to her, and one of the biggest struggles she faces is knowing when those rules need to be questioned and defied.
It sounds like Skrull simulation, Veers.
No, it's not, because I remember I was here.
Stop! Remember your training. Know your enemy. It could be you.
I am not gonna hurt you.
She led me to you.
Blimey, anyone else have deja vu? Don't get the wrong idea, these two adaptations are not identical. How could they be, if for no other reason than the fact that they're played differently? Jennifer Hale's giving a fairly gruff military performance, while Brie Larson likes to inject her Carol with a sort of affectionately dorky spirit in quiet moments. And there is even one major difference in the way these two act, which we'll talk more about in just a moment. But they are very similar. Now, the point here isn't that MCU Carol has the same characterization as Captain, Ms. Marvel, Warbird, Comics Carol always has. That wouldn't be true. Both versions we're focusing on here draw more on Carol's 21st century comic books than they do anything older. The point is, rather, that there exists in Earth's Mightiest Heroes Carol a previous version of this hero who is both a nearly universally beloved adaptation of Carol and very similar in terms of characterization to the Larson version. Not identical, but with the lion's share of the character traits we'd go on to see in the MCU hero, including seemingly her power level. Neither are invincible, of course, but many Captain Marvel and Endgame viewers didn't seem to vibe with the way Carol was as tough as Thor and nearly as strong as the Hulk. But that is precisely how Hawkeye rates her stats in the show.
Did you even read her file? She's as tough as Thor and almost as strong as the Hulk.
Am I saying then that there's no difference here? That for audiences to widely enjoy one and dispute the other is simply straightforwardly irrational? Well, no, of course not. All I'm saying is, we're probably best served looking outside of basic character traits and toward the way our perceptions of those traits are influenced by their respective texts and those texts' contexts. For instance, maybe it isn't that Carol's too powerful here, that this strength level makes her a Mary Sue, a poor character. Maybe it's more about when and how the story allows that power to be used and what obstacles it places in the way. Consider the climax of Carol's solo film. Powerhouse characters do tend to work better in ensemble stories where they're not always at the forefront, and so placing Carol in such a position poses a problem. The film realized this, had her depowered throughout much of its runtime, but perhaps undershot the balance here, as after rejecting the supreme intelligence, Carol hits full power for the rest of the third act, and moments such as the missile deflection and Kree ship smashing are less a matter of if Carol will win than how long that winning will take. Carol's not uniquely powerful here, not compared to her comics or to other liked versions, but the fact that she's presented with solely physical challenges within this climax means there's less to overcome, and the impression of overpoweredness is given. Personally, it doesn't bother me anymore. I find what's lost in terms of dramatic tension is made up for in symbolism. She shows us she's earned the win when she beats Yonrog, stops playing the game on his terms, and so I take the space stuff as more of a victory lap, a display of emancipated power than a final challenge, but not everyone's looking at the film that way. Not everyone has to. I gather, for a lot of people, it can just come across unsatisfying on a basic level, and that is obviously valid. Another example that springs to mind is that major difference I mentioned a minute ago, which again isn't actually a different trait, just a different expression of the same traits. To wit, EMH Carol has a certain awe or reverence for the Avengers that isn't shared by her MCU counterpart. We see this most clearly at the end of episode 204, Welcome to the Kree Empire.
Not too bad for your first time out.
Thanks. That means a lot coming from an Avenger.
Join the Avengers.
I don't know what to say.
And at the start of 207, who do you trust?
Tony. Thanks.
Go get him, Carol.
This isn't mirrored in the MCU.
Where are you going?
To kill Thanos.
Or not initially, at least. After the time skip, we do see her committed to the team, more than happy to be a cog in this project. Even this, though, is a far cry from the admiration we see in Ms. Marvel. This is a difference. Larson's Carol doesn't start off with that respect for the team that Ms. Marvel does, that the viewer shares. But why would she? Don't get me wrong, it makes perfect sense that the animated Carol would feel this way. She's seen the world saved by these guys, known some of them personally since well before she got her powers and got on their level, but Larson's Carol hadn't. Her familiarity with this group starts and ends with maybe having seen this guy in some old war serials at school, and maybe recognizing one of the daughters of Thanos. It's also, I think, worth remembering here that the animated Carol's respect for the Avengers only goes so far. So while this is a difference, it's not a fundamental difference in character. It is a difference created by the difference in world and situation this Carol finds herself in. A difference which itself results fairly directly from the MCU's production context, from Ike Perlmutter's infamous delaying of the Captain Marvel project to the point that making it a 90s period piece and putting Carol on a space bus until 2018 became all but necessary. Given this then, it would be strange, it would be out of character if MCU Carol had fawned over these guys, in the same way that it would have been out of character in EMH 206 had Ms. Marvel started fangirling over the Guardians. And yet, Carol's disposition at the start of Endgame often forms the basis of character-based criticism of MCU Carol. Think complaints like this. Sure, we don't actually see her response to the snap, it's off-screen, as is presumably the rest of that elaboration on what she's been up to. Endgame is a ruthlessly paced film, and while there are moments of calm, moments of character focus, most of these are of course given to those original 6 Avengers. Endgame is their swan song. Would it have been nice to see how Carol reacted, what she told them upon arriving at the compound? Sure. But which 3 minutes are you cutting from the film to find that time? So, in-universe, of course Carol would have had an emotional response to trillions of people being killed. Of course, she would have given more recent life details, but because her first team-up moment is in the jam-packed Infinity Saga finale, all that is left implied. And we see the scene selection, that is, what we're shown and when we're shown it, contributing just as much to the viewer's impression of Carol as what Carol does, just doing so invisibly. If there is a problem here, which, fairly big if, it's not so much a problem with Carol's character, as it is a problem with the way the film frames her. That might seem like a pointless distinction to make, but I don't think it is. Between these two takes on Carol Danvers, then, the hero's core traits remain consistent. Far more consistent, in fact, than with other characters from this show I've made similar comparative analysis videos on in the distant past. Does that necessarily mean that either are good characters, well-written, praiseworthy, all that? No, it doesn't. But I think the fact that a still beloved take on Carol Danvers and an often reviled one are characterized in very similar ways, share identical core traits, speaks to a wide disconnect between what people are perceiving in Larson's version of the character and what is actually there in that character. Because the way we remember a character has as much to do with when and how we're shown that character, and for that matter, how discussion, review, analysis after the fact frames that character, more on that later, as it does with that character's performance or their basic characterization. I'm sure there are textual reasons the Captain Marvel film, and I suppose its protagonist, didn't capture viewers to the degree of other MCU leads. The fact that we cut away from emotion and drama-rich moments twice.
I'm not really who you think I am. Is that... Wait, what is that? It's not showing up on my radar.
Go, Carol, fly!
Surely didn't help humanize Carol or clarify her journey here, but there's a huge disproportion between the quality of Captain Marvel and Endgame, the nature of Carol's characterization therein, and the intensely hyperbolic, ever-resurrecting nature and tone of the criticism leveled at all this. Honestly, if you got in a time machine, traveled back to 2012, and directed the same standards people have for Carol today at a character like Captain America after they'd had just one solo movie and one team-up appearance, you would come away with similar conclusions about one-note dispositions and lacking arcs. That's A. B is that, as a comparison to Earth's Mightiest Heroes shows, even when people are criticizing Carol's character, they're rarely actually criticizing her character. Their reasons are more often to do with what's shown and what isn't, and the positions this franchise has placed Carol in as a result of that prequelized introduction and the Perlmuttery meddling that necessitated it. But when we are talking about the character herself, rather than the films she's appeared in, either all you people are wrong about Earth's Mightiest Heroes, so let's start slinging mud at that show too, or Carol is, at her core, fine, good even, and not at all deserving of thread after thread, video after video of vitriol 4 years after her last major appearance. And to that you might say, well, remember, she's got a big movie coming out any day now, surely that's grounds for all this critique. But no, remember, if the problem is with the film's handling of her, why on earth are we looping the Marvels with a largely different cast and totally different writing team to any previous appearance of this character into it? Especially since, from the trailers at least, it actually looks a great deal like it's figured out a way to combat that power level problem, saddling Carol with both that temporary teleporty restriction on power use and the less temporary burden of having to wrangle 2 unruly allies the whole time. Those aren't difficulties that can be punched through. Doesn't make sense, does it? No. It's almost as though for some, it was never about the character or the films at all. In the last 5 or so years, an honest-to-God cottage industry has sprung up around criticizing near enough every little thing Brie Larson said or done, right down to her body language during promotional events. In case you're a little bit less online, that is not a joke. A deep dive into this whole mess is a topic for another day, but the nutshell version is that Brie began to be a target of the post-Gamergate and anti-SJW right after pointing out that films can often mean more or mean different things to different demographics, and that she personally was more interested in what teen women of color thought of A Wrinkle in Time, for instance, than that disproportionately white male 30s plus critic class. That's it. That was her original sin, and especially with the Captain Marvel and Endgame press tours, these increasingly sizable online factions took every move, every post, every otherwise fairly milquetoast feminist gesture Larson made, and click-farmed the shit out of it, fanning the flames of outrage from the uninformed, the too young to know better, and the resentful edgelords in cringe compilations, pseudoscientific nonsense content, and videos covertly tying these gestures in to wider alt-right narratives. This anti-Brie cottage industry, there's a very weak cheese pun in there somewhere, was one of the original pillars of that whole anti-woke fandom menace brainworm right we sometimes like to talk about on this channel, to the point that many thumbnails for unrelated anti-woke videos will just chuck Brie's face on there. Hating her is a part of their code. And across millions of views, countless clicks across countless platforms, it's a part that's seeped through no man's land, broken anti-woke containment, and become an instinctively accepted part of many Marvel fan spaces. Seriously. The comments I threw up a moment ago were from one of these perpetually spawning "let's all discuss what's wrong with Carol" Reddit threads, which I was originally planning to be a far bigger part of this video before the script ballooned to an unworkable size, but for real, I'll drop the link down below. Follow it, Control F Brie Larson or actress, and get reading. It's everywhere, it's upvoted, and it's utterly intermingled with genuine character and film critique. So after all this, to look back at Earth's Mightiest Heroes is to look back at a great show. A show whose characterization and narrative synthesized decades of comic lore to somehow implausibly create a new whole, feeling at once faithful, satisfying, and fresh. A show whose second season boasted a great opening run of episodes, one highlight of which is a brawling, powerhouse, kind but tough Carol Danvers who won't take stick from anyone, who displays a rough shine alone or as part of a team. But to look back at these episodes, and indeed to look at people's recollection of these episodes, is also to look back at a show, a time, when Carol Danvers could be strong, outspoken, eager to prove herself, as tough as Thor and nearly as strong as the Hulk, without a bunch of people having a problem with it, and without those problems coming to define even unrelated people's discussions of the character. Looking at this, looking again to MCU Carol and her discourse, looking at the way the Marvels was implicated in this forever criticism months before it released, the takeaway must be this. There's a difference between a character themselves and how we're shown that character, and there's another difference between that and the impression that showing leaves a viewer with. Each of these items can be criticized, of course, but unless we make an effort to separate these out, to make clear and to know ourselves what specifically we are saying, when it's relevant and when it isn't, every reasonable critic's point about this arc or that beat risks getting rolled up into fuel for the eternal flame of Carol Larson vitriol, a flame which is itself habitually used to ignite far nastier, far more dangerous blazes, and is just an evil, mean-spirited, and frankly stupid thing too. This video is sponsored by me begging you to subscribe. Seriously, if you've seen my videos before, you'll know I very rarely ask this, but come on. We're only about 10k away from getting the play button, and even if this video doesn't do great, it'll probably clear 10k. That plaque is all I want. For real, even if you didn't like the video, just sub for like a month or two, then come back and cancel. Holy god, I need that plaque so bad. And a huge thank you, as always, to all my supporters on YouTube and Patreon, especially Hanan, Daniel Goldhorn, Karen Kuhlman, Magath, Ryan Emily, Something Capitalism Bad, Thomas R, and Weirdy Beardy. But yeah, we're done. See ya.